The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace, casting long golden streams across the polished marble floors. Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge, stood in the private drawing room, her fingers trembling slightly as she held the official document that would change everything. The cream-colored paper felt heavier than it should have, weighted with implications that made her heart race. She had been expecting this day for months, ever since the doctors first mentioned the possibility. The specialist appointments, the hushed conversations with William late at night, the careful planning around their public engagements, it had all led to this moment. Yet now that it was here, Catherine felt utterly unprepared. The palace staff moved quietly through the corridors beyond her door, their footsteps muffled by thick Persian rugs. She could hear the distant sound of George's laughter echoing from the nursery wing, where he was playing with his governess. Charlotte's voice joined in, high and musical, followed by Louis's delighted squeals. The sounds of her children's happiness felt both comforting and heartbreaking at once. Catherine walked to the window, still clutching the document. The garden stretched out before her, meticulously maintained, and beautiful even in the crisp October air. Gardeners moved between the flower beds, preparing for winter, their movements systematic and peaceful. She envied them their simple tasks, their clear purpose. Everything in her world had become complicated overnight. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made her turn. She recognized William's distinctive gait, purposeful but unhurried, the walk of a man who had learned early that rushing often drew unwanted attention. He was returning from his morning engagement at the RAF base, and she knew he would come straight to find her, as he always did. Catherine quickly folded the document and slipped it into the drawer of the antique writing desk that had belonged to Princess Diana. Her hands shook as she arranged some flowers in a nearby vase, trying to appear casual. She wasn't ready to share this news yet. She needed time to process it herself first. "Darling," William's voice carried through the door as he knocked gently. "May I come in?" "Of course," Catherine called back, her voice sounding steadier than she felt. William entered, still wearing his RAF uniform, his hair slightly tousled from the helicopter flight. His face lit up when he saw her, the way it always did, and Catherine felt her heart clench. How would he react when he knew? Would that same warmth remain in his eyes? "How was the base?" she asked, moving toward him for their usual greeting kiss. "Productive," William replied, studying her face with the perceptiveness that had developed over their years together. "The new pilots are showing real promise. But enough about that. How are you feeling today?" Catherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. William had been so attentive lately, so careful about her health, her moods, her needs. He watched her with the intensity of someone who had learned to read the subtle signs of distress, the small changes that might indicate something was wrong. It was both touching and overwhelming. "I'm fine," she said, perhaps a bit too quickly. "Just tired, I suppose." William's brow furrowed slightly. "Have you eaten? Mrs. Henderson mentioned you barely touched your breakfast." Catherine inwardly cursed the household staff's attentiveness. Nothing happened in the palace without everyone knowing about it within hours. Privacy was a luxury that royal life rarely afforded, even within their own home. "I wasn't particularly hungry," she admitted. "But I'm sure I'll feel better after lunch." William stepped closer, his hands reaching for her shoulders in that gentle, protective way he had. "Catherine, you know you can tell me anything, don't you? Whatever it is, we'll face it together." For a moment, Catherine wavered. The document seemed to burn in the drawer behind her, its contents demanding to be shared. But fear held her tongue. Not fear of William's reaction. She knew he loved her unconditionally, but fear of making it real by speaking the words aloud. "I know," she whispered, leaning into his embrace. "I love you. And I love you," William murmured against her hair. "More than you'll ever know." They stood like that for several minutes, holding each other in the quiet morning light. Catherine tried to memorize the moment, the warmth of William's arms around her, the steady beat of his heart against her cheek, the faint scent of his cologne mixed with the crisp autumn air that clung to his uniform. Everything felt more precious when you knew it might change. A knock at the door interrupted their embrace. "Your Royal Highnesses?" came the voice of their private secretary. "The photographers are here for the charity photo session." Catherine's stomach dropped. She had completely forgotten about the scheduled photography session for the children's literacy campaign. In her current state, the last thing she wanted was to pose for official photographs. But canceling would only raise questions they weren't prepared to answer. "We'll be right there," William called back, his arms still around Catherine. As they separated, William caught sight of something in Catherine's expression that made him pause. Are you sure you're up for this? We could postpone if you're not feeling well. Catherine forced herself to smile. No, it's fine. The photographer came specially from London, and the charity is counting on these images for their winter campaign. I won't let them down. But, as they made their way toward the formal sitting room where the photo session would take place, Catherine felt the weight of the secret growing heavier with each step. The document in the drawer seemed to call to her, demanding attention, demanding action. She knew she couldn't keep this to herself much longer. The photographer, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and gentle manner, had already set up her equipment when they arrived. The room had been arranged with careful attention to lighting and background, creating an intimate yet regal atmosphere that would serve the charity's purposes well. Your Royal Highnesses, the photographer said with a respectful curtsy. Thank you so much for making time for this. I know how busy your schedules are. It's our pleasure, William replied warmly. This campaign is very important to us. As they moved through the various poses, seated together on the blue velvet sofa, standing by the fireplace, looking through children's books, Catherine tried to focus on the task at hand. But her mind kept drifting back to the document, to the implications of its contents, to the conversation she knew she had to have with William. Perhaps one more by the window, the photographer suggested. The natural light is beautiful there. They moved to the tall windows where Catherine had stood earlier that morning, wrestling with her secret. William positioned himself slightly behind her, his hand resting gently on her waist as they both looked out at the gardens. The photographer's camera clicked steadily, capturing what would appear to be a moment of quiet contemplation between a devoted couple. But Catherine felt anything but peaceful. The weight of unspoken words pressed against her chest, making it difficult to breathe naturally. She could feel William's presence behind her, solid and reassuring, and knew that her silence was already beginning to create a barrier between them. That's perfect, the photographer murmured. Just beautiful. The connection between you is so evident. Catherine almost laughed at the irony. Connection, when she was hiding something so fundamental from the man she loved most in the world. But she maintained her composed expression, the mask she had learned to wear so well during her years as a royal. When the session finally ended and the photographer had packed up her equipment, Catherine felt exhausted. The effort of appearing normal, of hiding her inner turmoil, had drained what little energy she had left. Well done, darling, William said as they walked back toward their private quarters. Those photographs will be wonderful for the campaign. Yes, Catherine agreed absently, her thoughts already returning to the drawer and its contents. They reached the drawing room where they had embraced earlier, and Catherine felt her resolve beginning to crumble. The secret felt like a physical presence between them now, impossible to ignore any longer. William, she began, then stopped, unsure how to continue. He turned to look at her, and she saw the concern that had been building throughout the morning finally surface in his expression. Catherine, please. Whatever it is, just tell me. The waiting is worse than whatever news you're carrying. She realized then that he had known all along that something was wrong. Of course he had. William knew her too well, loved her too completely, to miss the signs. Her attempt at normalcy had only delayed the inevitable conversation. Catherine walked to the writing desk with trembling fingers and pulled out the document. The paper rustled softly as she unfolded it, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet room. William watched her every movement, his expression growing more serious with each passing second. I received this morning, Catherine said, her voice barely above a whisper. From Dr. Matthews. William crossed the room in 3 quick strides, his hand reaching for the document. But, as Catherine tried to pass it to him, her fingers simply let go. The paper fluttered to the floor between them, settling on the Persian rug like a white flag of surrender. For a moment, neither of them moved to retrieve it. They simply stared at each other, the unspoken words hanging in the air between them. And, in that moment, before William even knew what the document contained, his reaction was instinctive and immediate. He stepped forward and pulled Catherine into his arms, holding her as if he could shield her from whatever news the paper contained. Whatever it says, he whispered fiercely against her hair, we'll face it together. Do you hear me? Together. Catherine felt the tears she had been holding back all morning finally spill over. In that simple gesture, in those few words, William had reminded her why she had fallen in love with him in the first place. Not because he was a prince, not because of his title or his position, but because he was the kind of man who would hold her before he even knew what he was holding her through. The document lay forgotten on the floor as they clung to each other, both knowing that whatever it contained would change their lives forever. But, for this moment, they had each other, and that was enough. The moments stretched between them like hours. William's arms wrapped protectively around Catherine as the document remained untouched on the floor. She could feel his heart beating rapidly against her cheek, matching the frantic rhythm of her own. The afternoon light had shifted, casting different shadows across the room, but neither of them seemed aware of the passage of time. Finally, William pulled back slightly, his hands cupping Catherine's face with infinite tenderness. His thumbs brushed away the tears that had traced silent paths down her cheeks, and she saw in his eyes the same love and determination that had carried them through every challenge their marriage had faced. "We should read it," Catherine whispered, though every part of her wanted to postpone this moment indefinitely. William nodded, but his hands didn't leave her face. "Whatever it says, Catherine, remember this. You are the strongest person I know. You've faced every challenge life has thrown at us with such grace, such courage. This will be no different." His words were meant to comfort, but Catherine felt the weight of expectation in them. Grace and courage, those were the qualities expected of a duchess, of a future queen. But what if she didn't feel graceful or courageous? What if she felt terrified and small and utterly unprepared for what lay ahead? She bent down and retrieved the document, her hands steadier now than they had been that morning. William moved to stand beside her rather than across from her, a physical reminder that they would face this together. The gesture was so like him, turning potential confrontation into solidarity. Catherine unfolded the paper slowly, her eyes scanning the formal letterhead of the Royal London Hospital. The words swam before her for a moment before coming into focus. Medical terminology mixed with careful, diplomatic language that tried to soften the impact of clinical facts. "The genetic markers we discussed," William read aloud, his voice carefully neutral. "The hereditary condition that runs in your maternal line." Catherine's grandmother had died young, too young, from a degenerative condition that had slowly stolen her mobility, her independence, and, finally, her life. Her mother had lived in constant fear of developing the same symptoms, submitting to regular testing that had, thankfully, always come back negative. Catherine had been tested too, when she turned 30, but had chosen not to learn the results unless symptoms appeared. Now, at 39, those symptoms had begun to manifest in ways so subtle that only someone trained to look for them would notice. The slight tremor in her left hand that she had attributed to stress. The occasional loss of balance that she had blamed on fatigue. The muscle stiffness that came and went without apparent cause. "The probability is now elevated to 73%, William continued reading, his voice growing quieter with each word. "Given the recent symptoms and family history, we recommend beginning preventive treatment protocols immediately." 73%. The number hung between them like a sword. Not a certainty, but close enough to feel inevitable. Catherine found herself thinking of her children. George with his serious eyes and gentle heart, Charlotte with her spirited independence, little Louis with his infectious laughter. Would they inherit this burden from her? Would they spend their adult lives wondering when their bodies would begin to betray them? "Preventive treatment," William said, setting the document aside and turning to face her fully. "That means there are options. Things we can do." Catherine nodded, but she knew what preventive treatment meant. Regular hospital visits that would be impossible to hide from the press. Medications with side effects that might affect her ability to carry out her royal duties. A gradual scaling back of engagements as the condition progressed, with no way to explain her absence without revealing the truth. "The children," she whispered, voicing her deepest fear. "They'll need to be tested eventually." William's jaw tightened, and for a moment she saw the protective father beneath the composed royal facade. The thought of their children facing this same uncertainty, this same fear, was almost unbearable for both of them. "When they're adults," William said firmly. "When they can make that choice for themselves. We won't burden them with this knowledge until they're ready." Catherine felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. Of course William would think of the children's emotional well-being first. Of course he would want to preserve their innocence for as long as possible. It was one of the many reasons she had fallen in love with him. His instinct to protect those he loved, even from knowledge that might hurt them. "But what about our work?" Catherine asked. "The charities, the engagements, the tours? If this progresses, then we'll adapt," William said simply. "The monarchy has survived much worse than a duchess with a medical condition. We'll find ways to continue serving that work within whatever limitations we face." His matter-of-fact tone helped calm some of Catherine's panic. This was William at his best, practical, solution-oriented, refusing to be overwhelmed by circumstances beyond their control. But she could see the pain in his eyes, the fear he was trying so hard not to show her. "I'm scared," Catherine admitted, the words barely audible. William pulled her close again, and this time she felt him tremble slightly. "So am I," he whispered. "But fear doesn't change the facts. And the facts are that we have options, we have excellent medical care, and we have each other. That's more than many people facing this condition have." They stood holding each other as the afternoon faded into evening, processing the magnitude of what they had learned. Catherine found herself thinking about all the assumptions she had made about their future, the years of royal duties stretching ahead, watching their children grow up and start families of their own, growing old together in service to the crown and country. Now everything felt uncertain. Would she be able to walk Charlotte down the aisle at her wedding? Would she be there to help with grandchildren? Would William spend his later years caring for an invalid wife instead of fulfilling his destiny as king? "I can't hear you catastrophizing," William said gently, as if reading her thoughts. "Remember what Dr. Matthews always says, we deal with facts, not possibilities." Catherine managed a weak smile. Dr. Matthews, their family physician, was a wonderfully practical woman who had guided them through 3 pregnancies and countless minor health scares with the children. She had been the one to notice Catherine's symptoms during a routine checkup and had recommended the genetic testing with characteristic directness. "She wants to see us next week," Catherine said, remembering the appointment schedule mentioned in the letter, "to discuss treatment options and monitoring protocols." "Then, that's what we'll do," William replied. "One step at a time." A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. "Your Royal Highnesses?" came the voice of their housekeeper, Mrs. Henderson. "The children are asking about dinner. Shall I tell them you'll be joining them?" Catherine looked at William and saw her own thoughts reflected in his expression. The children were waiting for them, expecting their normal family dinner, completely unaware that their parents' world had just shifted on its axis. How do you sit at a table with your children and pretend everything is normal when you've just learned that normal might not last forever? "Tell them we'll be there in 5 minutes, William called back. "Of course, Your Royal Highness." As Mrs. Henderson's footsteps faded down the corridor, William turned back to Catherine. "Can you do this? The dinner, the bedtime routine, all of it?" Catherine considered the question seriously. Could she sit with George, Charlotte, and Louis, help them with their homework, listen to their chatter about school and friends and playground politics, all while carrying this new knowledge? Could she read them bedtime stories and sing lullabies while wondering how many more evenings like this they would have together? "I have to," she said finally. "They need their normal routine, especially now." William nodded approvingly. "And it might help us too. Focusing on them, on the present moment instead of the uncertain future." They took a few minutes to compose themselves, washing their faces and changing clothes as if preparing for any other family dinner. Catherine chose a soft blue sweater that George had once said made her look like a princess from one of his storybooks. The familiar routine of getting ready helped her feel more centered, more in control. As they walked toward the family dining room, they could hear the children's voices through the door. George was explaining something to his younger siblings in his serious, patient way, while Charlotte provided animated commentary and Louis contributed the occasional delighted squeal. "Whatever happens," William said quietly, pausing with his hand on the door handle, "we have this. We have them. And that's worth fighting for with everything we have." Catherine felt tears threaten again, but these were different tears, not of fear or despair, but of overwhelming love for the man beside her and the children waiting beyond the door. Yes, their future was uncertain now. Yes, there would be challenges they had never imagined facing. But they would face them together as a family. William opened the door, and they stepped into the warm, brightly lit dining room where their children waited. George looked up from his homework with a smile that lit up his whole face. Charlotte bounced in her chair, eager to share some story from her day. Louis clapped his hands when he saw them, his face beaming with uncomplicated joy. For the next hour, they immersed themselves in the beautiful chaos of family life. They helped with mathematics problems and listened to detailed accounts of playground adventures. They negotiated vegetable consumption and refereed sibling disputes with the patience that only parents can muster. And gradually, Catherine felt some of her panic begin to ease. This was what mattered, not the uncertain future, but this moment, this evening, this family gathered around a table sharing food and laughter and love. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would treasure these moments with a new intensity, appreciating what she had while she had it. As they tucked the children into bed later that evening, Catherine found herself lingering in each room, memorizing details she had previously taken for granted. The way George carefully arranged his stuffed animals before sleep. How Charlotte insisted on having exactly 3 books on her nightstand. The soft sound of Louis's breathing as he settled into peaceful slumber. "Mummy," George called softly as she was leaving his room. "Yes, darling. Are you feeling better today? Papa said you weren't feeling well this morning." Catherine's breath caught in her throat. Even at his young age, George was remarkably perceptive, always tuned in to the emotional atmosphere around him. She couldn't lie to him, but she also couldn't burden him with adult worries. "I'm feeling much better now," she said, and realized it was partly true. The fear was still there, but it was balanced now by determination and love and the unshakable knowledge that whatever came, they would face it together. "Good," George said with satisfaction. "I love you, Mummy. I love you too, sweetheart. More than all the stars in the sky." As she closed his door and walked back toward her and William's bedroom, Catherine felt something shift inside her. The document and its contents were still real, still frightening. The uncertain future still loomed ahead of them. But tonight had reminded her that life was more than medical diagnoses and statistical probabilities. Life was George's serious questions and Charlotte's infectious laughter and Louis's sleepy cuddles. Life was William's steady presence and unwavering support. She found William sitting on their bed, still fully dressed, staring out the window at the darkened gardens. He looked up when she entered, and she saw in his face the same mix of fear and determination that she felt in her own heart. "How are the children?" he asked. "Perfect," Catherine replied. "Completely, beautifully perfect." They prepared for bed in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts, but aware of the other's presence. As they lay in the darkness, Catherine felt William's hand find hers across the expanse of their bed. "Whatever happens next," he said quietly, "we have tonight. We have right now." "Yes," Catherine whispered back. "We do." And for the first time since reading that morning's document, she felt something like peace. The following morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. Sunlight streamed through the curtains of their bedroom at Kensington Palace, and Catherine could hear the familiar sounds of the household coming to life. Staff moving quietly through the corridors, the distant chatter of the children getting ready for school, the soft chime of the grandfather clock in the hallway marking the hours. But everything felt different now, filtered through the lens of yesterday's revelation. Catherine lay still for several minutes, watching William sleep beside her. In sleep, the worry lines that had appeared around his eyes over the past year seemed to soften, and he looked more like the young man she had fallen in love with at university than the future king, carrying the weight of duty and responsibility. She studied his face in the morning light, memorizing details she realized she had been taking for granted. The small scar on his forehead from a childhood accident, the way his hair fell across his brow when he slept, the peaceful expression that only appeared when he was completely at rest, free from the constant awareness that he was always being watched, always being judged. William stirred as if sensing her gaze, his eyes opening slowly and immediately seeking hers. For just a moment, she saw confusion there, as if he was trying to remember why something felt different. Then, reality settled over his features like a curtain falling. "How did you sleep?" he asked softly, reaching out to brush a strand of hair from her face. "Better than I expected," Catherine admitted, and it was true. Once she had finally fallen asleep, she had slept deeply, exhausted by the emotional upheaval of the previous day. "The children will be down for breakfast soon," William said, glancing at the clock on the bedside table. "Are you ready for another day of pretending everything is normal?" Catherine considered the question. Was she ready? Would she ever be ready? But the alternative, hiding in their bedroom and avoiding the world, wasn't an option for people in their position. Their children needed them, their duties required them, and their marriage demanded they face this challenge together rather than apart. "I think pretending might be easier than I thought it would be," Catherine said slowly. "Because in some ways, everything is normal. The children still need breakfast. George still has that mathematics test today. Charlotte still needs help choosing what to wear to her friend's birthday party. Those things haven't changed." William nodded, understanding immediately what she meant. The domestic rhythms of family life had a steadying quality that she hadn't fully appreciated before. No matter what medical uncertainties they faced, Louis would still need his favorite stuffed elephant at nap time, and Charlotte would still insist on wearing her tiara to breakfast because it was Tuesday, and Tuesday was Princess Day. They rose and dressed with practiced efficiency, a routine developed over years of royal life where every minute was accounted for and tardiness could throw off an entire day's schedule. Catherine chose a cheerful yellow dress that she knew the children loved, armor against whatever challenges the day might bring. The breakfast room was already alive with activity when they arrived. George sat at the table with his homework spread before him, reviewing his mathematics notes with characteristic thoroughness. Charlotte was engaged in animated conversation with her governess about the proper protocol for attending royal birthday parties versus non-royal ones. Louis was in his high chair, systematically deconstructing a piece of toast with the focused concentration that only toddlers could muster. "Good morning, my darlings," Catherine said, moving from child to deliver kisses and morning hugs. "Mummy, tell Miss Sarah that I should wear my blue dress to Emma's party because blue is a princess color," Charlotte announced without preamble. "All colors can be princess colors, sweetheart," Catherine replied, settling into her chair as William took his place at the head of the table. "But blue is certainly a lovely choice." "See," Charlotte said triumphantly to her governess, who smiled with the patience of someone accustomed to royal 3-year-old logic. As the morning meal progressed, Catherine found herself treasuring these ordinary moments with new intensity. George's serious concentration as he explained his mathematics homework to William. Charlotte's elaborate storytelling about her stuffed animals' overnight adventures. Louis's delighted giggles when William made funny faces at him across the table. But she was also hyper-aware of her own body in ways she had never been before. Was that slight tremor in her left hand when she reached for her coffee cup? Was she imagining the brief moment of dizziness when she stood to get Charlotte's sweater? Every sensation felt magnified, potentially significant, possibly the beginning of something worse. "Earth to Mummy," Charlotte said loudly, and Catherine realized she had been staring blankly at her breakfast plate. "Sorry, darling. What did you say?" "I asked if you want to come see my drawing of the palace garden. I drew all the flowers we planted together." "I would love to see it," Catherine replied, forcing herself to focus on the present moment rather than her swirling anxieties. After breakfast, the familiar routine of getting the children ready for school provided welcome structure. Backpacks were checked, lunch boxes were packed, and the eternal search for missing shoes was conducted with military precision. Catherine found comfort in the mundane tasks, braiding Charlotte's hair, helping George organize his homework folder, making sure Louis had his comfort blanket for nursery. As their car pulled away with the children inside, waving through the rear window, Catherine felt the protective bubble of family life dissolve. Now there were only hours of official duties ahead, each one requiring her to be on in a way that suddenly felt more challenging than ever. "First engagement is the Literacy Center," Williams said, consulting the schedule their private secretary had prepared. "Then, the hospital visit. Then, the reception for the environmental charity. 3 public appearances, each one requiring her to smile, make conversation, and project an image of health and vitality while cameras captured every gesture and expression." The thought of it felt overwhelming in a way it never had before. "William," Catherine said as their car navigated through London traffic, "what if someone notices? What if the symptoms become visible during an engagement?" William reached for her hand across the seat between them. "Dr. Matthews said the early symptoms are subtle. Most people won't notice anything unless they're specifically looking for medical signs. And if something does happen, we'll handle it. We always do." Catherine nodded, but her anxiety remained. The British press was notorious for its attention to detail, particularly when it came to royal health. Every stumble, every moment of fatigue, every change in appearance was analyzed and speculated about endlessly. How long could they keep this private? The Literacy Center was bustling with activity when they arrived. Children from local schools had gathered to participate in a reading program that Catherine had helped establish the previous year. Their faces lit up when they saw her, and several of the younger ones ran forward with the uninhibited enthusiasm that never failed to touch her heart. "Your Royal Highness. Your Royal Highness," called a girl of perhaps 6 years old, waving a handmade card. "I drew you a picture." Catherine knelt to the child's level, accepting the artwork with genuine appreciation. The drawing showed a stick figure in a crown standing next to what appeared to be a very large book, with hearts floating around both. "This is beautiful, Emma," Catherine said, reading the name tag pinned to the girl's sweater. "Tell me about your picture." "That's you. And you're reading the best story ever. And everyone is happy because stories make everything better. Emma explained with the matter-of-fact wisdom of childhood. Catherine felt tears threaten unexpectedly. Stories make everything better. If only it were that simple. But, looking at Emma's bright, hopeful face, she realized that in some ways, it really was that simple. This child believed in the power of stories to transform the world. And who was Catherine to contradict her? The remainder of the visit passed in a blur of reading activities, conversations with teachers, and photo opportunities with the children. Catherine found that once she focused on the work itself rather than her own fears, the familiar rhythms of public engagement took over. She asked questions, listened to stories, and provided encouragement, all while cameras captured every moment for the evening news. But, as they prepared to leave for their next engagement, Catherine felt the tremor in her left hand again, more pronounced this time. She quickly clasped her hands behind her back, hoping William hadn't noticed. But, of course he had. William noticed everything when it came to her well-being. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly as they walked toward their car. "Just tired," Catherine replied, which wasn't entirely untrue. The emotional stress of hiding her condition while maintaining her public persona was more exhausting than she had anticipated. Their next stop was the Royal London Hospital, where they were scheduled to visit the children's ward and meet with medical staff about a new pediatric research program. The irony of the location wasn't lost on either of them. Here they were, visiting a hospital to celebrate medical advances while privately grappling with their own medical challenges. The children's ward was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Young patients, some barely older than Lewis, faced their medical treatments with courage that humbled Catherine. She spent time with each child they visited, listening to their stories, admiring their artwork, and marveling at their resilience. One little boy, perhaps 8 years old, was particularly memorable. He had lost his hair to chemotherapy, but his eyes sparkled with mischief as he showed Catherine his collection of superhero figures arranged on his bedside table. "This one is my favorite," he said, holding up a figure of Wonder Woman. "She's really strong, and she never gives up, even when things are scary." "That's a very good choice," Catherine said solemnly. "What do you think makes her so brave?" The boy considered this question seriously. "I think she's scared sometimes, but she does the right thing anyway. My mom says that's what real bravery is, being scared but doing what you have to do." Catherine felt the wisdom in his words settle into her heart. Being scared but doing what you have to do. Wasn't that exactly what she was doing right now? Wasn't that what she would have to continue doing in the days and weeks ahead? "Your mom is very wise," Catherine told the boy. "And so are you." As they moved through the ward, Catherine found herself drawing strength from these young patients. If children facing cancer and other serious conditions could maintain their hope and courage, surely she could find a way to face her own uncertain future with similar grace. The medical staff they met with were passionate about their work and excited about the new research program that would help develop better treatments for childhood diseases. Catherine listened to their presentations with genuine interest, but part of her couldn't help wondering if any of these advances might eventually help her own condition. The final engagement of the day was a reception for an environmental charity focused on protecting natural habitats. The event was held in a beautiful historic building, with guests ranging from celebrities to scientists to government officials. Catherine and William moved through the crowd, making conversation and showing support for the organization's important work. But, as the evening wore on, Catherine felt her energy flagging in a way that concerned her. Was this normal fatigue from a busy day, or something more? She found herself gripping William's arm more tightly than usual as they navigated through the crowd, using his stability to mask her own growing unsteadiness. During a lull in conversations, William guided her to a quiet alcove near a window overlooking the Thames. The river flowed peacefully below them, its surface reflecting the city lights in shimmering patterns. "How are you holding up?" William asked, his voice low enough that no one else could hear. Catherine looked out at the water, gathering her thoughts. "It's strange," she said finally. "Part of me feels completely normal, like nothing has changed. But another part of me is hyper-aware of every sensation, every moment of tiredness, every tiny tremor. I don't know if what I'm feeling is real or just anxiety." William nodded understandingly. Dr. Matthews warned us this might happen. The psychological impact of knowing about a condition can sometimes create symptoms that wouldn't otherwise be noticeable. "So you think I'm imagining things?" "No," William said firmly. "I think you're human. I think you've received frightening news, and you're processing it the best way you can. And I think that regardless of whether individual symptoms are physical or psychological, the underlying concern is real and valid." Catherine felt a wave of gratitude for his measured response. He wasn't dismissing her fears, but he wasn't feeding into them either. It was exactly the kind of balanced support she needed. They rejoined the reception and completed their remaining obligations, but Catherine was relieved when they finally settled into their car for the journey back to Kensington Palace. The familiar interior of the vehicle felt like a sanctuary after hours of public performance. "How do you think I did today?" Catherine asked as London's streets flowed past their windows. William considered the question seriously, as he always did when she asked for his honest assessment. "I think you were remarkable. Professional, engaged, warm with everyone we met. No one would have suspected you were dealing with anything other than a perfectly normal day." Catherine felt both proud and sad at his words. Proud that she had maintained her composure and fulfilled her duties despite her inner turmoil. Sad that she had become so skilled at hiding her true feelings behind a public persona. But, more importantly, William continued, "How do you think you did?" "I think I learned something important today," Catherine said slowly. "From that little boy in the hospital, actually. He said that bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing what you have to do anyway." William smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him all day. That sounds like wisdom worth remembering. As their car turned through the gates of Kensington Palace, Catherine felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief at being home, exhaustion from the day's demands, anxiety about the future, but also a growing sense of her own strength. Today had been a test, and she had passed it. Not perfectly, perhaps, but adequately. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to practice being brave in the face of uncertainty. But tonight, she would focus on the simple pleasures of home, helping the children with their bedtime routines, sharing a quiet dinner with William, and finding peace in the ordinary moments that made life worth living, regardless of what medical challenges lay ahead. The week following Catherine's first full day of public engagements since receiving Dr. Matthews' report passed in a carefully orchestrated dance of normalcy. Each morning brought the same routine: breakfast with the children, official briefings, public appearances, and the constant, exhausting effort of maintaining the perfect royal facade while privately grappling with an uncertain future. But by Friday evening, as Catherine sat in Dr. Matthews' private consulting room at the Royal London Hospital, the weight of that performance was beginning to show. The medical office was designed for discretion, with a private entrance that allowed high-profile patients to visit without attracting attention. Still, Catherine felt exposed and vulnerable in the sterile environment, surrounded by medical equipment and charts that would determine the course of her life. Dr. Matthews was a woman in her early 50s with kind eyes and an efficient manner that had always put Catherine at ease. She had delivered Lewis, guided the family through various childhood illnesses, and maintained their health with the perfect balance of medical expertise and understanding of royal protocol. Today, however, her usual warmth was tempered by the gravity of their situation. "Your Royal Highness," Dr. Matthews said, settling into her chair with Catherine's file in hand. "Thank you for coming in so quickly after we received the genetic test results. I know this hasn't been an easy week for you and Prince William." William reached for Catherine's hand as they sat side by side in the comfortable chairs Dr. Matthews had arranged near her desk. The gesture was automatic now, a physical reminder of their united front against whatever challenges they might face. "We've had time to process the initial shock," Catherine said, pleased that her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "Now we need to understand what comes next." Dr. Matthews nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the right approach. Let me start by explaining what we know and what we don't know, based on your test results and family history." She opened Catherine's file and spread several documents across the desk between them. Catherine recognized some of the forms: the genetic testing request she had signed months ago, family medical history questionnaires she had filled out over the years, and the recent report that had started this entire journey. "The genetic markers we found indicate a strong predisposition to the same condition that affected your grandmother," Dr. Matthews began. "However, predisposition is not destiny. Even with the elevated probability we discussed, there's still a significant chance that you may never develop severe symptoms." Catherine felt a small flutter of hope. What defines severe symptoms? In the early stages, the condition typically presents as muscle stiffness, occasional tremors, and some balance issues. Many people live with these symptoms for years without significant impact on their daily activities. In your grandmother's case, the progression was more rapid than usual, which is why her experience seemed so devastating to your family. William leaned forward slightly. "But There's no way to predict how rapidly it might progress in Catherine's case. Not with certainty, Dr. Matthews admitted. However, we have much better treatment options now than we did 30 years ago. Early intervention can significantly slow progression and improve quality of life. That's why I wanted to see you so quickly after we received the results. Catherine found herself thinking of her grandmother, a vibrant woman who had loved gardening and music and had always had time to play with her grandchildren. The disease had stolen those simple pleasures gradually, first taking her ability to tend her beloved roses, then her capacity to play piano, and finally, her independence altogether. What does early intervention look like? Catherine asked. Dr. Matthews pulled out another set of documents. Primarily medication to help manage symptoms and potentially slow progression. Physical therapy to maintain muscle function and flexibility. Regular monitoring to track any changes. And lifestyle modifications that can help optimize your overall health. Medication, William repeated thoughtfully. What are the side effects? And, more importantly, could Catherine's taking medication become public knowledge? It was a question that had been weighing on both their minds all week. Royal health was a matter of intense public interest, and any regular medical treatment would be difficult to keep private indefinitely. The medications I'm recommending have relatively mild side effects, some drowsiness initially, possibly some nausea as your system adjusts. Nothing that should interfere with your official duties, Dr. Matthews explained. As for privacy, all royal medical information is strictly confidential. However, I understand your concerns about long-term discretion. Catherine appreciated the doctor's diplomatic way of acknowledging the impossible position they found themselves in. As members of the royal family, their health was considered a matter of public interest, yet they deserved the same privacy as any other patients. There's something else we need to discuss, Catherine said, voicing the concern that had been haunting her all week. The children. What are the implications for them? Dr. Matthews' expression grew more serious. The genetic markers can be inherited, but the pattern isn't straightforward. Each child would have approximately a 40% chance of carrying the predisposition, but even if they do carry it, that doesn't guarantee they'll develop symptoms. 40%. Catherine felt the number settle into her consciousness like a stone. Nearly half a chance that she had passed this burden on to George, Charlotte, and Louis. The guilt was almost overwhelming. When would we need to have them tested? William asked. Not for many years, Dr. Matthews said firmly. There's no medical benefit to testing children for adult-onset conditions. The standard recommendation is to wait until they're 18 and can make informed decisions about genetic testing for themselves. Catherine felt a mixture of relief and continued worry. At least her children could enjoy their childhood without the shadow of genetic uncertainty hanging over them. But the knowledge that they might someday face these same difficult conversations was heartbreaking. Let's focus on your immediate treatment plan, Dr. Matthews said, perhaps sensing Catherine's emotional state. I'd like to start you on a low dose of medication next week. We'll monitor your response carefully and adjust as needed. I'd also like to arrange for you to work with our best physical therapist to develop an exercise routine that can help maintain your mobility and strength. How often would these appointments be? Catherine asked, already thinking about how to coordinate medical visits with her packed schedule of royal engagements. Initially, I'd like to see you monthly for monitoring. The physical therapy could be done at Kensington Palace if you prefer, to maintain privacy. We can also arrange for all blood work and testing to be done during your visits here rather than requiring separate appointments. William and Catherine exchanged glances. Monthly medical appointments would be challenging to hide from their staff and security detail, but it could be managed. The royal family was accustomed to maintaining privacy around sensitive matters. What about travel? William asked. We have tours scheduled for the next 18 months, Australia, Canada, several European visits. Travel shouldn't be a problem in the early stages, Dr. Matthews assured them. We'll make sure you have adequate medication supplies, and I can provide medical contacts in each country you visit, just in case. The key is not to let this condition limit your life unnecessarily. Catherine felt some of the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. The picture Dr. Matthews was painting wasn't the catastrophic future she had been imagining. It was challenging, yes, but manageable. Life-changing, but not life-ending. I have to ask, Catherine said quietly. What's the long-term prognosis? In 10 years, 20 years. Dr. Matthews considered her answer carefully. With early intervention and modern treatment, many people with this condition maintain their independence and quality of life for decades. Some experience minimal progression. Others require more support over time. The honest answer is that we won't know your particular trajectory until we see how you respond to treatment. But I could still be walking Charlotte down the aisle at her wedding? Catherine asked, voicing one of her deepest fears. There's every reason to be optimistic about that, Dr. Matthews replied with a warm smile. Charlotte is 3 years old. By the time she's ready for marriage, medical treatments will be even more advanced than they are today. As they wrapped up the appointment and scheduled Catherine's next visit, she felt cautiously hopeful for the first time since receiving the initial test results. The future was still uncertain, but it wasn't the bleak landscape she had been imagining. Walking through the hospital corridors toward their car, Catherine was struck by the normalcy of it all. People going about their daily business, some dealing with health challenges far more severe than hers, others simply living their lives without the luxury of worrying about distant possibilities. How are you feeling? William asked as they settled into the back seat of their car for the drive back to Kensington Palace. Relieved, I think, Catherine said slowly. Dr. Matthews made it sound much less frightening than I had built it up to be in my mind. The unknown is always scarier than the known, William observed. Now we have a plan, concrete steps we can take. That makes it feel more manageable. Catherine nodded, then looked out the window at the London streets passing by. People were walking their dogs, shopping for groceries, meeting friends for coffee, all the ordinary activities that made up a life. She realized that despite everything, she would still be able to participate in those simple pleasures for the foreseeable future. I want to tell the children something, Catherine said suddenly. William turned to look at her with surprise. Are you sure? Dr. Matthews said there was no need to worry them with adult concerns. Not about the condition specifically, Catherine clarified. But I want them to know how much I love them, how proud I am of them, how grateful I am to be their mother. I realized this week that I sometimes take those feelings for granted, assume they know without being told. William's expression softened. I think that's beautiful, darling. And they should hear it. When they arrived home, they found the children in the family sitting room, engaged in their usual Friday evening activities. George was reading quietly in the window seat. Charlotte was constructing an elaborate castle with her building blocks, and Louis was playing contentedly with his toy trains on the carpet. Mummy, Papa, Charlotte called out when she saw them. Come see my castle. It has a tower for princesses and a garage for dragons. Catherine knelt beside her daughter, admiring the colorful structure with genuine enthusiasm. It's magnificent, darling. Tell me about the princesses who live here. As Charlotte launched into an elaborate story about brave princesses and friendly dragons, Catherine felt overwhelmed by love for this spirited little girl. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she was determined to be present for every moment of her children's childhood that she possibly could. George, what are you reading? William asked, settling into a chair near the window seat. A book about space exploration, George replied seriously. Did you know that Mars has ice at its poles, just like Earth? I did not know that, William said with equal seriousness. That's fascinating. Maybe I'll be an astronaut someday, and go see it myself, George said with the matter-of-fact confidence of childhood. I think you'd make an excellent astronaut, Catherine said, moving to sit beside him. You have the curiosity and intelligence for it. George beamed at the praise, and Catherine felt her heart clench with love and pride. Whatever the future held, she wanted to support every dream, celebrate every achievement, and be present for every milestone in her children's lives. They spent the evening engaged in the comfortable routines of family life. Dinner together, help with weekend homework, baths, and bedtime stories. But Catherine approached each activity with new intentionality, storing up memories and savoring moments that she had previously moved through on autopilot. As they tucked Louis into his crib, his sleepy face peaceful in the soft nursery lighting, Catherine whispered, I love you, my sweet boy. You bring such joy to our family. Louis mumbled something unintelligible but content, already drifting toward sleep. Charlotte required 3 bedtime stories and 2 glasses of water before finally settling under her princess-themed blankets. I love you to the moon and back, Mummy, she said drowsily. And I love you to all the stars and back again, Catherine replied, their traditional exchange that never failed to make Charlotte giggle. George was the last to be settled, his active mind needing time to wind down from the day's learning and discovery. As Catherine sat on the edge of his bed, she found herself wanting to share something meaningful with her serious oldest son. George, she said softly, you know that Papa and I are very proud of you, don't you? Not just because you're smart or well-behaved, but Because of who you are as a person. You're kind and thoughtful and curious about the world. Those are the most important qualities anyone can have. George looked at her with the intense attention he gave to subjects that interested him. Are you proud of Charlotte and Louis too? Of course I am. I'm proud of each of you for different reasons. Charlotte is brave and creative and full of life. Louis is sweet and joyful and loving. And you are wise and gentle and caring. You each bring something special to our family. George nodded solemnly, processing this information with characteristic thoughtfulness. I love you, Mummy. And I'm proud of you too. Proud of me. Why? Because you help people and you're kind to everyone and you take care of us even when you're tired, George said simply. Catherine felt tears threaten at her son's innocent words. If only he knew how much his simple faith in her meant, especially now when she was questioning her ability to be the mother he deserved. Thank you, darling, she managed to say. That means more to me than you know. After the children were all settled for the night, Catherine and William retreated to their own bedroom. The day had been emotionally draining, but in a different way than she had expected. Rather than feeling depleted by fear and uncertainty, she felt filled up by love and gratitude and determination. Today was a good day, she said as they prepared for bed. Yes, William agreed. I think we both learned that we're stronger than we thought we were. Catherine considered this as she brushed her hair at her dressing table. Was she stronger than she had thought? Perhaps. Or perhaps she was simply learning that strength didn't mean the absence of fear or uncertainty. Strength meant facing those challenges with love and grace and the support of people who cared about you. As they settled into bed, William's arm came around her in the familiar gesture of comfort and connection that had sustained them through every challenge their marriage had faced. Whatever tomorrow brings, William said quietly in the darkness, we'll face it together. Together, Catherine agreed. And for the first time since this journey began, the word felt like a promise rather than a hope. 6 months had passed since that October morning when Catherine first received Dr. Matthews' report, and the world had settled into a new kind of normal. The early intervention treatments were working better than anyone had dared hope. The tremors had stabilized, the muscle stiffness was manageable with physical therapy, and most days Catherine felt almost like her old self. Spring had arrived at Kensington Palace with its usual fanfare of blooming gardens and longer days. Catherine stood in the sunlit conservatory, arranging flowers for the children's Easter celebration later that afternoon. The simple task of selecting daffodils and tulips for the centerpieces brought her a deep sense of contentment that she had learned never to take for granted. The yellow ones are my favorite, Charlotte announced, appearing at Catherine's elbow with the silent stealth that only 3-year-olds seemed to master. Mine too, Catherine agreed, lifting Charlotte onto a nearby stool so she could help with the arrangements. They remind me of sunshine, don't they? And baby chickens, Charlotte added solemnly. Everything good is yellow. Catherine smiled at her daughter's logic. Over the past months, she had developed an even deeper appreciation for these casual conversations with her children. The medical uncertainty had taught her to be fully present in moments that she might have previously rushed through. The conservatory door opened, and William entered, carrying Louis on his shoulders while George walked beside them, all three bearing the slightly disheveled look of men who had been engaged in serious outdoor play. We've been investigating the garden preparations for this afternoon's egg hunt, William announced. The advanced scouting mission was highly successful. Did you find good hiding spots? Charlotte asked, bouncing with excitement on her stool. The very best, George said with the confidence of an older brother who took his responsibilities seriously. But we're not allowed to tell you where they are because that would ruin the surprise. Catherine watched this interaction with the dual awareness that had become second nature to her over the past months. On one level, she was simply enjoying a normal family moment on a beautiful spring morning. On another level, she was consciously storing every detail. The way the sunlight caught the golden highlights in William's hair, Charlotte's gap-toothed grin, George's earnest expression, Louis's delighted squeals as he tugged on his father's ears. The medication and physical therapy had been working well, but Dr. Matthews had been honest about the unpredictable nature of the condition. There might come a time when Catherine's ability to participate in activities like Easter egg hunts would be limited. For now, though, she felt strong and capable and grateful for every ordinary moment. Shall we have some breakfast before our guests arrive? Catherine suggested, lifting Charlotte down from the stool. The family moved toward the breakfast room together, the children chattering about their plans for the day. Catherine's sister Pippa would be joining them with her family, along with their parents and a few close friends who had become like extended family over the years. It would be the first large gathering they had hosted since receiving Catherine's diagnosis, and she felt both excited and nervous about maintaining her composure throughout the day. Over breakfast, Catherine noticed William watching her with the careful attention that had become his habit. He had learned to read the subtle signs of fatigue or discomfort that might indicate she was having a difficult day, and she appreciated his concern even when it felt slightly overwhelming. "How are you feeling this morning?" he asked quietly while the children were distracted by their Easter-themed pancakes. "Good," Catherine replied, and meant it. "A little nervous about today, but good overall." Nervous about what specifically? Catherine considered the question. What was she nervous about? "I suppose I'm worried about whether I can keep up with everything. Host a party, entertain the children and their cousins, be present, and engage for hours without anyone noticing if I need to rest." William nodded understandingly. "We can build in breaks. I'll help manage the flow of activities so you're not on constantly. And remember, these are people who love you. They're not going to be judging your every move." Catherine felt some of the tension in her shoulders release. This was what their marriage had become over the past months, a partnership based on careful communication and mutual support that was stronger than it had ever been before. The medical uncertainty had stripped away any pretense between them, leaving only honesty and love. The morning passed quickly as the household prepared for their guests. Catherine supervised the final details of the Easter egg hunt, while William helped the children get dressed in their holiday outfits. The staff bustled through the palace with quiet efficiency, transforming the family spaces into a festive celebration venue. When the first guests arrived, Catherine felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with shifting into hostess mode. Pippa appeared first with her husband and 2 young children, followed closely by their parents. The palace filled with the comfortable chaos of family celebration, adults catching up over coffee while children raced through the corridors in search of adventure. "You look wonderful, darling," Catherine's mother said, drawing her aside for a private moment. "How are you really doing?" Catherine appreciated her mother's directness. Shortly after receiving her diagnosis, she and William had decided to share the news with their immediate family members. The secret had felt too heavy to carry alone, and they knew they might need support in the months ahead. "Most days are good," Catherine said honestly. "The treatment is helping, and having a plan makes everything feel more manageable. Some days I hardly think about it at all. And the other days? The other days I remember that nothing is certain, and that can be frightening," Catherine admitted. "But I'm learning that uncertainty has always been part of life. I just wasn't paying attention to it before." Her mother squeezed her hand. "You've handled this with such grace, Catherine. Your father and I are very proud of how you and William have faced this together." Before Catherine could respond, they were interrupted by a commotion in the garden. Looking through the window, they could see the children lined up for the official start of the Easter egg hunt, their faces bright with anticipation. The next hour was pure joy. Catherine moved through the garden with the adults, watching as the children searched for hidden treasures among the flower beds and behind garden sculptures. Their squeals of delight when they discovered particularly well-hidden eggs brought smiles to every adult face. Charlotte approached every potential hiding spot with methodical determination, while George used logic and observation to deduce the most likely locations. Louis, too young for systematic searching, simply wandered around collecting whatever caught his eye, occasionally sitting down to examine his findings with serious concentration. "Mummy, look," Charlotte called, running toward Catherine with her basket nearly overflowing. "I found the special golden egg." Catherine knelt to admire the prize, painted in shimmering gold leaf and hidden in the most challenging location. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Where was it?" "Inside the fairy house by the rose garden," Charlotte said proudly. "I remembered that fairies like shiny things, so I looked there first." Catherine felt a surge of pride at her daughter's creative problem-solving. These were the moments that made everything else worthwhile, watching her children discover their own capabilities, celebrate their successes, and approach the world with curiosity and confidence. As the afternoon progressed, Catherine found herself managing the social demands of hostessing better than she had expected. The familiar rhythms of family conversation, the pleasure of watching loved ones enjoy themselves, and the simple satisfaction of a successful gathering all combined to create a sense of well-being that felt almost normal. But, as the day wore on, she became aware of a familiar heaviness in her legs and a slight tremor in her left hand that indicated she was approaching her limits. Rather than pushing through as she might have done in the past, she made a conscious decision to listen to her body's signals. "William," she said quietly as they stood together watching the children play a game of garden cricket, "I think I need to take a short break." "Of course," William replied immediately. "Why don't you go rest in the conservatory? I'll keep an eye on everyone here." Catherine slipped away from the group without fanfare, making her way to the quiet sanctuary of the conservatory where she had arranged flowers that morning. The space was filled with afternoon sunlight and the gentle fragrance of spring blooms, creating a peaceful retreat from the happy chaos of the party. She settled into a comfortable chair and allowed herself to simply breathe and be still for a few minutes. This was another thing she had learned over the past months, the importance of recognizing her own needs and meeting them without guilt or apology. Taking care of herself wasn't selfish. It was necessary for her ability to care for others. Through the glass walls of the conservatory, she could see the party continuing in the garden. William had organized an impromptu game of football with the children and their fathers, while the women had settled into conversation around the garden table. The scene looked like something from a magazine about perfect family celebrations, but Catherine knew it was made even more precious by its impermanence. "Mummy," George's voice interrupted her meditation. "Are you all right?" Catherine looked up to see her oldest son standing in the conservatory doorway, his face wearing the concerned expression that made him seem far older than his years. "I'm fine, darling," Catherine assured him. "Just taking a quiet moment. Would you like to join me?" George approached and settled into the chair beside her, his manner more serious than typical for a 6-year-old at a party. "You've been different lately," he said with characteristic directness. Catherine felt her heart skip a beat. Had her attempts to shield the children from adult worries been less successful than she thought? "Different how?" she asked carefully. George considered the question with his usual thoroughness. "You pay more attention," he said finally. "When we're talking or playing or doing things together, you're really there, not thinking about other things like grown-ups usually do." Catherine felt tears threaten at her son's observation. From his perspective, her increased mindfulness and presence wasn't a sign of medical uncertainty. It was simply improved attention. The idea that her diagnosis had actually made her a more present mother was both ironic and deeply moving. "That's a very thoughtful observation, George," Catherine said. "You're right that I am trying to pay closer attention to the important moments. Sometimes it takes a while for grown-ups to learn what really matters." George nodded as if this explanation made perfect sense. "I like it when you pay attention like that. It makes me feel important." "You are important," Catherine said, reaching over to smooth his hair. "You and Charlotte and Louis are the most important things in my world." They sat together in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the party continue in the garden beyond. Catherine marveled at the way children could shift from deep conversation to simple companionship without any awkwardness or need for explanation. "Should we go back to the party now?" George asked eventually. "Yes, I think we should," Catherine agreed, feeling refreshed by their quiet interlude. They rejoined the celebration just as William was organizing teams for a treasure hunt around the palace grounds. The children threw themselves into this new activity with renewed enthusiasm, while the adults settled into lawn chairs to watch and cheer from the sidelines. Catherine found herself seated between her sister and mother, the three women watching their children race around the garden in pursuit of clues. The conversation flowed easily between family updates, shared memories, and gentle observations about the joys and challenges of motherhood. "You seem more relaxed than I've seen you in years," Pippa observed during a lull in the children's shouting. Catherine considered this comment. Was she more relaxed? In some ways, yes. The forced acceptance of uncertainty that came with her diagnosis had freed her from many of the anxieties that had previously consumed her energy. When you truly understood that the future was unpredictable, it became easier to focus on the present moment. "I think I'm learning to worry about the right things," Catherine said, "and to let go of the things I can't control. That's wisdom that usually takes decades to develop," her mother added with a smile. As the afternoon faded toward evening and guests began to gather their children and belongings for departure, Catherine felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The day had been everything she had hoped for, filled with love, laughter, and the kind of memories that would sustain her family regardless of what challenges lay ahead. William appeared at her side as they waved goodbye to the last guests from the palace steps. "How did I do as co-host?" he asked with a teasing smile. "Admirably," Catherine replied, "though I noticed you let Louis win every single game." Strategic management of competitive dynamics, William said seriously. Essential for successful family gatherings. They walked back into the palace together, their arms around each other's waists, while the children raced ahead to examine their Easter treasures one more time before bedtime. The day had left Catherine feeling tired but fulfilled, grateful for both the celebration and the people who had shared it with them. Later that evening, after the children had been bathed and storied and tucked into their beds, Catherine and William sat together in their private sitting room. The palace had returned to its usual quiet, but the warmth of the day's celebration seemed to linger in the air around them. "Thank you," Catherine said, curling up beside William on the sofa. "For what?" "For helping me believe that we can still have everything that matters, even with the uncertainty. For showing me that love and family and joy don't depend on perfect health or guaranteed futures." William's arms tightened around her. "We've both learned that, I think. That the important things are much simpler than we used to believe." Catherine nodded, thinking about George's observation that she was more present now, about Charlotte's delight in yellow flowers and hidden treasures, about Louis's ability to find joy in whatever caught his attention. Her children were teaching her, without knowing it, how to live fully within each moment rather than constantly planning for or worrying about the next one. "Do you think they'll remember today when they're grown?" Catherine asked. "I think they'll remember that they were loved," William said, "and that their parents created a home where they could be completely themselves. That's what really matters." As they prepared for bed that night, Catherine felt a profound sense of peace that had nothing to do with her medical prognosis or the uncertainty that still shadowed their future. She had learned to find security not in guarantees about tomorrow, but in the depth of love that surrounded her today. The Easter celebration had been more than just a successful party. It had been proof that joy and connection and family love could flourish even in the presence of uncertainty. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she and William had built something strong enough to weather any storm. Their love for each other and for their children would remain constant, regardless of what medical developments the future might bring. In the darkness of their bedroom, Catherine reached for William's hand across the space between them, just as she had on that first frightening night after receiving her diagnosis. But now the gesture felt different, not desperate or fearful, but simply loving. A quiet affirmation of partnership and commitment that needed no words. "Whatever comes next," William said softly, echoing the promise they had made to each other so many months ago. "Together," Catherine replied, and the word held all the strength and hope and unshakable love that had carried them this far and would carry them forward into whatever future awaited them.